Okay, so our next our next presenter, her name is Susan Wyant. She's an area healthcare manager. She works for Steelcase, and she's a certified interior designer who has won many awards. And she has an interesting way to discover your true strength. And earlier in the green room, we were talking about how we both get recognized when we ride the bus. So we're both pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about that. So taking the bus is the best. And also riding the bus is a great way to find inspiration. She's not going to talk about that, but I ride the bus a lot to get jokes. All right. Not so much design inspiration. All right, so our next presenter, she's an area healthcare manager for Steelcase. Please put your hands together for Susan Wyant.
Tonight I'd like to share a story with you about failure and bouncing back. This is the story of how I lost my job, not once, but twice, and how I came to be here with you tonight. So back in 2008, I was working at a design firm in Denver, Colorado. And I was part of an interdisciplinary team that had just designed this high school that you see behind me. And it was a really fun project. I had actually loved high school. And so for me, designing a high school was about as good as it gets in design. You might have called me a nerd. That's okay. I'll take it. But I was also really enjoying life in Colorado. Things were going really well, and I'd actually thought about buying a house. And so I approached my principal at the time and asked him for his perspective. Now, in 2008, those of you that weren't a part of the market at that time, things weren't great, but I felt like we were really talented, and I was what you might call naively invincible. So when I asked him what he thought about me buying this house, he said, "I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think you should go for it." So you can imagine my surprise when just a few weeks later, I found myself in his very office once again, being told that my position had been eliminated. So he asked me, and I was more than happy to share with him that no, I had not bought the house, and in fact, I'd started looking at grad school, so it was going to be fine. Things were okay. But in reality, I never saw that coming. And I had been at the office until 9 o'clock the night before, as many of us do, preparing for a client presentation. And so I was blindsided. So there I was, 29 years old, unsure of my future, and unemployment was just getting worse and worse. I was one of 17 people laid off that day, and while the national average was around 10% in 2009, architecture and construction was considerably worse. It was closer to 20, maybe more, depending on how you calculate that. So as I took inventory, I suddenly realized the only reason I was in Denver was to be captain of my kickball team. So I humbly packed my bags and moved home to Minnesota, and I lived with my parents for a brief period of time. And as I sat there thinking, what has happened to my life, I recognize that there's always at least 3 opportunities that come out of every challenge. So the first for me was to actually take a break. I didn't realize how burnt out I was until I actually stepped away. And conveniently, my parents won a pontoon that year, and my dad was retired, so I got a great tan. I know it doesn't look like that's possible, but I promise you, I got a really good tan. And it was also a chance to reconnect with my family. I'd been gone for over a decade, and it was nice to have that time back together. The third is that it let me reevaluate what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I wanted to be creative. I thought about going and teaching English abroad. I thought about grad school. I even considered becoming a baker or a hairstylist for that sense of instant gratification in the creative process. But as you might have guessed, none of that happened. I actually found another job and joined a team of really smart people, and it was fantastic. We designed hospitals and healthcare spaces around the country, particularly this one in Cincinnati. So I was traveling back and forth, and this is a little tip for you guys. don't ever trust a sales rep who comes in and says, hey, I've got an idea for you. So I had a sales rep come in and say, I was thinking you would be really good on the IIDA board. And I said, you know what, Ann, now you know who I'm talking about, Ann. So Ann, I said, only if it involves students. Well, unbeknownst to me, Ann was in charge of students. And so the next thing you knew, I was on the IIDA board. And that was a lot to take on at that particular moment in time. I was traveling, as I mentioned. I was hanging out in the basement of the hospital, evaluating mock-ups on a regular basis. But it turned out that I loved being a part of this team. And so as things went on, I went into a more collaborative space with design, but then 2012 hit. And for our firm, the work that had kept us afloat in the tough times of 2008 and 2009, that started to taper off. And so once again, I found myself without a job. This time was totally different. So later that afternoon, I was at the Apple store talking to a genius about how to save my contacts, and his advice was, you should write them down. And thanks for that. So instead, I sent an email to my entire network. I figured it was better to just have that one container message where at least I had everyone's information. And I simply said, today was my last day. I'll be looking for opportunities, and I would appreciate anything that you could send my way. Well, it was overwhelming, the response that I received. I had my first interview lined up by the end of that day, and it just continued on and on. And so what I want to share with you is that sometimes things come to you in really unexpected ways. It turns out that losing your job can be incredibly liberating. You can walk into any firm or business in town, especially if you do it under the auspices of I'm here for IIDA. But it also helps to explore things that you didn't know you were capable of. So to that end, that was my team for IIDA with a student's role, and I had such a great time, and we had so much momentum behind the work that we were doing that I actually took on the role of becoming president. And that helped me grow in so many ways that I never would have anticipated. And it all came together at once. At the same time that I accepted that role, I also joined the team with Steelcase, and I found roles that really played to my strengths. So my first endeavor as president was to get everyone on a ropes course. And as terrifying as that looks, I think it's an incredible symbol of what this design community has to offer. You're not able to do this alone. You're gonna have challenges in your career. And so I encourage you that as you climb your way to the top, think about who's surrounding you and make sure that you've got the support of the design community with you. Thank you.